Hello YouTube, thank you for clicking through. You're about to watch an informative new video from Ex Why Zed Print, but before you do, 01206 766 47 or hello@xyz.co.uk. They're the two best ways for you to get in contact with us about your next project. If you need a print quote, if you need any help or advice preparing your artwork, ping us an email or give us a call. We'll be happy to help you transform your ideas into print. And now, here's the video you've been looking forward to watching. Hello, welcome to the definitive guide to producing a hardback book at Ex Why Zed. We're going to show you what case binding even is. We're going to show you how the cover, the end papers and the text all come together to form a really high-end luxury book for your next project. We're going to take you methodically through the choices that you've got for the cover, for the end papers, the luxury options you can add to the cover, what you can do with the text pages. We're going to showcase numerous books that we've printed in the past. We're going to give you some insight into what layouts work inside. We're going to give you all the information you need to make a high-end, premium art book that you can put on your coffee table. When friends and family come round, you can go, yeah, got that printed at Ex Why Zed. We want to produce a publication for you that you're absolutely proud of, that gets you top marks at uni for your FMP and does real justice to your illustrations or your photography. So, without further ado, let's get started.
So let's start with what is the process of case binding. Well, first of all, let's do a quick comparison between a case bound book, which is here, and a perfect bound softback book. So case bound hardback, perfect bound softback. This is exactly the same artwork, same book, but you'll see that the hardback is slightly larger because the cover on the hardback overhangs by 3 or 4 mil on each side. The perfect bound book sits neat and flush to the top, outer and bottom edge, whereas the case bound, the harder cover overhangs a little bit, so it makes it slightly bigger, definitely more resilient and a more substantial book. Both the inside pages on the perfect bound softback and the hardback are glued along the left hand edge, and then the cover's bound on, but obviously the cover is far weightier on the case bound version. So let's put the softback to the side for the moment and let's concentrate on the process of case binding. So if we take a look at this image of a flat cover, you can see there are 3 sections of 2.5mm grey board that make up the hardback cover. So you've got one for the front cover, one for the centre, for the spine, and one for the back cover. So these are 2.5mm, and these form the chunky cover that we see ultimately on the final book. Over the top of that, you then wrap the cover material. So you can see on the graphic again that it overhangs, and it overhangs by 17mm. So all of that area is glued to the inside of the cover along the top, the bottom and the 2 sides. So that is what sticks the cover to the hardback case. We call it a case, and that's where the term case bound comes from. So when you come to take a look at our hardback setup guide for the cover, you'll notice that you have to have an extra 17mm around all 4 edges. It needs to have the graphics on there if you've got a background colour, and that is because these tuck inside and they are partially visible right around the edge. If we pick up a book here, you can see that you can just about see kind of 3 to 5mm around 3 of the edges of the cover graphic. So if you've got a full colour image on the front and the back cover, you might want to continue that image onto the inside, onto this extra 17mm, and then when it's tucked inside and glued on the inside of the hardback case, the image continues there. The majority of the 17mm though is covered here, you can see, by the end papers. So the end paper is a continuous double page spread, continuous sheet of paper, twice the width of the text block. So it's glued on the left hand side here to the inside of the front cover, and then the right hand side then forms the first leaf of the book. So we've got left hand side glued, right hand side you can have content on all 3 of these panels, and then when you turn that leaf over, you are then on the right hand side into the text pages of the book. If we look at it from the side, you can see the mechanics. So the end paper is glued to the inside front cover, and at the back of the book glued to the inside back cover. that is what keeps the text block within the case bound cover itself. So you can see the text block is glued with resilient PUR glue along the left hand edge. If you do have a larger budget, then there is an option for us to bind the inside pages into sections and then either glue in sections or section sew the left hand edge. That is more of an expensive process though. It's a process that tends to be done by old school bookbinders still. So it's very retro, it does look awesome, and it does make the binding really tough, but our PUR glue is tough in itself and definitely a cost saving option there. So to wrap up the case binding process itself, we've got the front cover, which is wrapped and glued around the 3-part cover case, made up of the front cover, the back cover and the spine, 2.5mm grey board, so it's nice and tough. Then we have the end papers glued to the inside front cover and inside back cover, and then the text block itself is glued to the end papers. So the text block actually isn't glued to the front cover at all, it's glued to the end papers, which are glued to the cover.
So a final couple of points on the end papers. When you supply us with the artwork for the end papers for the start of the book, if the end papers are going to be printed, you're going to supply us with 2 double page spreads, one for this spread and one for this spread, and obviously the leaf that gets glued to the inside front cover, that's going to be blank. So you've got 3 pages of content that you can provide artwork for, left, right, and then left. And at the back of the book, again, 2 double page spreads, one for this one with content on the left and the right, and then one for this one on the reverse of that end paper, where you've just got content on the right, and then the left hand side is obviously glued to the inside of the front cover. So 3 pages of content there. Potentially you can add content to on the end papers, or you can leave them blank, or we can go for the coloured Colorplan route, where it takes the end papers take the colour of the actual paper itself. And then a final technical point, when you're preparing the artwork, you'll see here, because the end papers are glued to the first text page, you're losing kind of 5mm of that first text page is completely obscured because it's glued on. You'd want to keep any content a good 10 to 15mm away from the spine side of that first text page and of the last text page, to ensure that the reader doesn't have to really force the page down to actually be able to see that content. So keep any logos or any important information. I mean, that one's probably 2 centimetres, 20mm away from the edge. That works perfectly. Again, with the inside pages, don't have anything too cramped into the middle, otherwise you really have to press it down. It makes the reader work. That's not great really, it's not very ergonomic. So if you keep content a good kind of 2 centimetres away from the spine side of the page, that's perfect.
The last thing that I'll mention on the mechanics is the inside pages. We need an absolute bare minimum of 28 inside pages. 28 is really thin, 32 or 36 or 40 would be better. Children's books, I know that sometimes children's book authors struggle to get to 32, so 28 is the absolute minimum. I stress that by saying absolute a lot of times. That gets you to just about thick enough for us to glue it. Any thinner and there's just not enough surface area to get the PUR glue down. So 28 pages will give you about a 3mm spine. Ideally 32, 36, 40 would be brilliant. Now let's move on to the options that you've got for the actual cover itself. So there are 3 choices that you can go for. So the first up here is a standard printed hardback book cover. So you supply the artwork, we then print it onto 170 silk. It's laminated either matte or gloss lamination to the outside, and that then gets wrapped around the hardback case. So you can send over entirely bespoke artwork. It's great for photography, it's great for imagery, illustrations work particularly well, anything like that really. You supply us a PDF, we print that off. We go for 170 silk because it's a resilient paperweight that lends itself to the rigours of case binding. Any thinner and it might fracture, any thicker and you wouldn't actually be able to, it wouldn't be malleable enough to be able to go around the case. So 170 is perfect, and because there are a number of processes that take place during the binding, we do recommend lamination. Honestly, just laminate the front cover. It takes away any chance of scuffing, of the ink cracking. Gloss lamination is obviously going to give you a sheen, like the Frank Bowling ones here. Matte lamination is obviously a lot duller. The images aren't going to jump off. It might make your text easier to read. Yeah, nice smooth surface matte lamination, but it doesn't have the shine that gloss does. So you've got first option there is a printed cover on your hardback book. We have a look at this really, really beautiful book called Moonlit Shore. What Masuma's done on this one is he's actually put a pattern in the background and then he's spot UV varnished the stars, the shooting stars and the planets on there. So if you tilt it towards the light, you can actually see a slight shimmer. So spot UV varnish is the process of gloss varnishing certain sections of the cover, and then when you tilt it towards the light, they shine, especially when they're on a matte laminated background. There's a clear difference. So on the printed hardback books, you've got the option of all of the kind of premium options. So you can go for gloss spot UV varnish, or you can go for foiling. Embossing and debossing aren't available on hardback books just because the 2.5mm thick hardback cover itself is too hard to push through. So you can't emboss or deboss, but you can spot varnish and you can foil. Next up is a linen or a fabric cover. Now we buy all of our bookbinding materials from Winter & Company, and here is an example of their Wibberline range. So there are 6 different textures within the Wibberline range. You can see hundreds of colour choices. You can choose buckram, which is a slight sort of point prick off the page. Fine linen is like a linen finish. Satina is vertical lines. Flute is slightly thicker vertical lines. Natural is more of a just sort of a flat surface. Really, really nice. Natural, you've got, what have we got there? Natural there, you've got 40, 50 choices of colour. So there's plenty of scope. So that we then cut the sheet size to the correct size for your book, and then that gets wrapped around the hardback case. So this is a really, really eye-catching way of producing a high-end book with a linen or a fabric style finish. So you notice it straight away when you pick it up. It's got a bit of texture to it, feels really premium. It's a really, really great solution. The textured cover just feels illustrious. It feels classy when you lift it up. You rub your hand over it. It just feels high end and premium. This is a really good solution if you want your book to really stand out. Now, the next decision that you have is how do you add content to these covers? Well, the Wibberline and the materials from Winter & Company aren't printable. So if you want your logo or you want some graphics or a title put on there, then the only way to get that on there is by foiling. So we've got a couple of books here, The Pram in the Hall and East London at Dawn, and both of those have foil over the top of the material from Winter & Company, so it just pushes slightly in there. You really have to kind of dig deep with these foils to actually get it on there because of how coarse the materials are. So it also has a slight debossing effect, which is quite nice. So you rub your hand over it and it just sits in to the texture of the paper a little bit. Very, very striking again, and just oozes class. Really, really nice. So I'll put up a graphic now of the foil choices. If there's something you want, there's a couple of hundred again to choose from. Let us know, because it's a very specific foil that we have to use for this, like I say, because of how coarse the material is. But there are plenty of choices. So this material can't be printed. So really you are limited to kind of a simple logo or some text. You're not going to go for fine illustrations on this or vector graphics because the foil, it's just not going to work with those. The detail's going to be too fine. So bold text and bold shapes works really, really well. Vessel here shows what can be achieved with a simple, and I stress simple, vector graphic foiled on the front cover of the linen material. This is buckram, I think, because it's got the slight point prick coming through. So if you keep your logo simple, we can foil more than just the text on there. This works really well. It's a striking shape. There's an emblem inside, and the gold foil, we've been able to dig really deep onto the black, so it's a really nice contrast between the gold foil and the black buckram background. That's very, very effective. It's a good option. Just opening that one up as well while we've got this book to hand. Really, really nice end paper with the picture of the eagle or the bird sweeping down and the flowing white line across there to add a bit of motion. Beautiful book, this one, with cracking illustrations. Craw is a tattoo artist, and these are some of his finest works. There is a third option that we can do, and that is to go for Colorplan from GF Smith. So Colorplan in itself has a slight texture as well, so that kind of does give a nod towards the linen and the material finish. Colorplan obviously is a high-end premium paper, the Rolls-Royce of papers, you might say. There are 50 or 52 colour choices, I think. And actually the brilliant thing about the Colorplan range is that there are 25 textures and embossings that you can choose as well. So you can go for Colorplan, choose one of the colours from their range, and then add their linen embossing over the top, and that again then solves the problem of having a high linen textured cover on your book. And then they are printable, because Colorplan is printable. It will go through our digital press and it will go through our litho press. So we've got this awesome book here, Africa, and you can see that we've got a combination of foil on the title in gold foil, but then we've also got the elephant printed in black ink onto the I think it's vermilion red Colorplan background. And this is about as cool as it gets for a book cover. We've got the little dude, yes, slightly suspect subject matter I think this one, but the little dude with the helmet on is kind of squatting down behind the A. We'll move on to this one, which is an altogether more user-friendly subject matter, all about the British primitive goat. Now, this is an awesome book. I think it was for a final major project. If you open it up, we've got curious metallics galvanised for the end papers, shiny silver end papers, which goes really, really well with the silver foiling on the front cover. So this is Cool Blue Colorplan, one of the colour choices from Colorplan. Cool blue, and it's got silver foiling. So if you're going to go for foiling on the front cover, I don't think you have to reinvent the wheel. Just go for the title. I mean, it's simple and effective. It lets people know when they pick the book up from the shelf what the book's all about, who wrote it, put your name on there, put your name and the title on the spine. It doesn't have to be all singing, all dancing. Just put the title on there. It's just as effective. If you've got a small vector logo, that will work as well. So when we open this one up, you've got, like I say, these awesome end papers onto curious metallics galvanised. If we go on to talk about end papers a little bit now, so you've got the option of basically going for Colorplan end papers are really good, really striking. You can see on this book here, we've got Colorplan end papers. So the advantage of Colorplan is that because the paper's dyed that colour, the edge of the paper as well takes the colour. So you don't have a white edge, which just oozes class, looks more luxurious. Really, really nice way to do it. 52 or 50 colour choices from GF Smith on their Colorplan range. You open the book and straight away you're hit by the colour. which is great. Alternatively, you can print the colour. If you're a student and you're working to a budget for a final major project or a portfolio to hand in, then just print an all-over colour on the end papers. You will have the white edge, but it is going to save you realistically hundreds, £100, £200, depending on the print run. Alternatively, how about go for a pattern on there? So if you've got a nice logo or you've got a graphic which you can pull from somewhere else in the book, why not tessellate that or repeat it on the end papers? So people open up the cover and straight away you go, oh wow, look at this cool pattern. It just, I don't know, maybe it means people are going to carry on reading the rest of the book after they've seen a cool pattern there. So your front cover onto Colorplan allows it to be printed, gives you more flexibility. So in theory, you could go for one of the lighter Colorplan shades and then you could print an image on there. I'm not sure why you'd do that because I'm guessing the image would cover the Colorplan, so you're probably better off choosing our house paper instead rather than paying a lot more and then covering it anyway. Does that make sense?
So now moving on to the inside pages and the layout of your inside pages. We're going to start looking at photography hardback books to start with. So let's look at the layout of these 3 portrait photography books and see what really works. So let's start with the brilliant British primitive goat. So with portrait, so it obviously lends itself well to portrait images. So a consistent 12mm border all the way around the edge of the pages. So it draws the reader's eye in. They know where they've got to start looking because there's always a consistent border. You wouldn't want to go for a border any thinner than 12mm really. If you go for a really thin border of 2 or 3mm, it can move around. There's always a little bit of movement in the trimming and binding of books. If you imagine you've got a stack of paper on top of each other, if you print 100 books, the paper's going to be this big. Paper's a natural material, it does move a little bit as we're trimming. When the blade comes down, it can move and it would slightly adjust the border. So if you've got a tiny sort of 2 or 3mm border and it moves a little bit, the picture might end up falling off the edge of the page or the border might end up being bigger. If you go for a 10, 12, 15mm border, nice and consistent all the way around, if there is a little bit of movement, it's far less obvious. Absolutely stunning images. I mean, the 3 photography books that we're going to look at for portrait couldn't be more polar opposite in terms of their subject matter. But there we've got a full bleed image, a double page spread, which again is really, really eye-catching. Stunning photography. Everybody loves a goat, right? Nice landscape photography. So here's an option for if you've got 2 pages, and maybe you've gone for a 100-page book, you've got 150 really good images, so you're going to need to cram 2 or 3 images onto one page on occasion. So this is a really neat way of doing it. Neither image is particularly cramped because you've got plenty of white space on there. White space is always good for layout and in terms of web design as well. An image on the left-hand side, an image on the right-hand side. There's just no page where you look through this book where you feel like the information and the photography is cramped. There's plenty of white space on there, so the reader's got room to breathe. Next up, East London at Dawn. So the images in this book, you'll see straight away, are far more impactful. They're kind of almost full bleed images, but again, we have this border around the edge, this time kind of 15 to 18mm border. Some of the images, we've gone for 2 on a page, so we've got a left and a right hand image. Add a caption in the bottom corner. Your typography for a caption, 7 or 8 point will be fine. We don't need to reinvent the wheel on this. Let's not start putting Comic Sans in there at 10 or 12 point. Just a neat, subtle caption in the corner is perfect. Lots of different layouts within this book, but rather than going for full bleed double page spread images, we have got the border on there which neatly frames the photography. Again, stunning photo work in this one from Anthony Eaps. Bit of text on there as well. Again, we're keeping the text well out of the spine gutter. It's stopping 15 to 20mm short of the spine, so the reader doesn't have to press the page down. All of the text is legible as you're reading through the book. So this is Ria Vocal's No Hands 2, which is a follow-up, surprisingly, to No Hands 1. So this depicts the 2018 Football World Cup. Rio was given unprecedented access pitch side. So what he's tried to do here is depict the World Cup from the kind of point of view that the fans and the TV don't normally show. These are images that really dive deeper into the fabric that makes up the World Cup. The things you don't see when you're watching BBC and ITV. So a lot of full bleed images to really showcase the photography. Text in the corner, creeping quite close to the edge there. This is a lot better layout where it's given plenty of precedence, white space around it. So some of the images are full bleed. This one is probably a 6 to 8 mil border. You can actually see, problem that I was highlighting earlier, where the top border has ended up being slightly thinner than the bottom border. So if you went for kind of 12 to 15 mil, that becomes less of an issue. The movement here has accentuated the difference between the two borders. Always do our best to trim, obviously, but if you've got a stack of 100,000 sheets of paper, then there will always be a little bit of movement. Nice full bleed images, full bleed, perfect if you want to showcase images like that. Ryu's gone for silk for his inside pages, which gives the images vibrancy. It makes the colours jump off the page. If we go back to Jack's goat book, this is far more suited to uncoated, and Jack actually has gone for Evolution uncoated, which is slightly off-white and is 100% recycled as well. So if you can compare the two, you can see that the Evolution uncoated is slightly warmer. The silk is a bright white. The thing you have to consider when you're going for Evolution uncoated is it does have a warmth for the paper itself. So if you're going to print images on there, they are not going to look like they do on screen. They won't anyway, because screen is RGB and backlit, but you have to allow for even more kind of change between how they look on screen and how they look on print. Because of the warmth of the paper, it is going to make your images look slightly more yellow. It's going to warm them up. They won't look how they do on screen, so please do bear that in mind. But the paper is 100% recycled, very tactile, and I would say absolutely suited to the subject matter on this publication. Football and the World Cup is kind of all singing, all dancing. It's a lot shinier, there's a lot more hype around it. Silk probably is a better suited paper for this one, and I think Ryu smashed it with the paper choice. We've gone for a nice thick premium paper inside, so when you flick through, there's very little show through, even on the full bleed images. Great book. Next up, landscape photography books, and we've picked these four because each one has its own idiosyncrasies that we want to highlight and show what can be achieved. So we'll start with Massimo's book down here in the bottom corner. So this is an A4 landscape photography book. We can print up to A4 on the width, which means that you get plenty of space to put your images in there. Look at this little fella. So landscape photography books obviously mean that you can get awesome photography in there. The breathtaking nature of these mean that I think it's perfectly acceptable to have the left-hand side blank and the right-hand side with an image. Again, we've got the large border around the edge and we've got a neat page number in the corner. There's a definite thought process for leaving the left-hand side blank as you go through the book and just having images on the right-hand side, but it comes down to cost, I guess. You can obviously fit more of your images in there and showcase more of your images if you have them on both sides. This is a neat page layout where we have a larger image on the right-hand side and a smaller image on the left. They don't compete with each other. This one obviously has precedence, but the reader is drawn to this one because of the white space around it. Again, neat page numbers in the corner. Great photography, large borders around the edge. I'd say that's probably 18 mil, 15 to 18 mil. Look at the photography in this book. So we did a lot of tests before we went ahead with this one, and this one's ended up with 130 silk for the inside pages. Glaciers and seascapes do have a certain kind of shine to them anyway, so I think that's brought forward using the silk paper. I think uncoated would mute the images on this occasion, although it is a natural subject matter, obviously. I just think that silk works really well. Look at the brightness and the colour of the images bounces off the page. If you're ever in any doubt, I guess silk is always the safest choice to go for the inside pages of a photography book. It's going to look most like they do on screen. If colour reproduction is a key issue for you, which I imagine it is, then just go for silk. It's the safest choice. What we can do before we print the whole book like this on a hardback book is we can send you out flat sheet proofs. So the pages just flat, they're not bound, but you can see exactly how your images reproduce onto the paper that you've chosen. Then you can drop the images back into Photoshop, you can make the necessary tweaks, and then send us a new file before the final run. Just gives you that last sort of saving grace that you've seen exactly how your images are going to print before we go ahead. One thing that I will say on timings is allow an extra week in your project for that, and hardback books themselves do kind of take 6 or 7 working days anyway. If you add the linen cover and you add a foiling to it, you probably want to allow 2 or 3 weeks for the entire project. The hardback books aren't something that we ever rush. If you come through and say we need it in 2 days, we are going to have to turn that one down, unfortunately. There are a lot of processes involved with putting them together, and 6 or 7 working days is fine for standard. If you go for the foiling on the cover, you want to allow it a good 2 weeks. If you've got an important deadline, it's never great having things turn up on the day it's got to be handed in at university or at an event. Next up on the landscape books, we've got Lucy Rose's No Words Left. Now this one is predominantly what first appears to be black and white images as we go through, but they're actually CMYK images because you can see there's a slight kind of warmth to them. Some of the images are kind of coming over a little green. We've got a bit of cyan and a bit of yellow in there as well. So black and white images are always tricky. On screen, they look really punchy and full of contrast. When you print them onto paper, they do lose some of that contrast and they're not going to have as much punch. Unfortunately, this is unavoidable, but there are 2 ways around it. You can either go for, leave them as CMYK images and you can boost the contrast in Photoshop so they do jump off the page a little bit more, or you can convert them into grayscale, which does flatten them down, but the upside is that there'll be no colour cast, so you won't have the kind of green or the magenta tinge because we'll only be printing your images using black ink. So there's 2 approaches. Black and white images, I strongly recommend you leave enough time for us to send flat sheet proofs first so you can see exactly how your photography is going to print onto the paper you've chosen, and there's no grey area, so to speak, although there might be if you've converted it to grayscale. But it gives you that peace of mind that you've seen how they print first and you don't get a nasty surprise when the book turns up. So if you're going to go down that route, 2-3 weeks for the whole project is realistic. Like I say, we won't rush it, and it's for your peace of mind. Get flat sheet proofs first and you can see how the images look. This is slightly bigger than A5 landscape, this book. It's got neat borders around the edge. Some are quite close to the trim edge, but they're generally in the same position on every page. So the reader's eye kind of adjusts as it's going through. It knows exactly where it has to look. This is a really, really nice book. And we've got the linen cover with the white foil on the front and on the spine. Ode to Hackney is a final major project for Laura Beckwith a couple of years ago. So Laura has showcased her local borough of Hackney. You can see here the page position, the photography on each of the pages is roughly in the same place, which is a really, really straightforward and easy way of putting together the layout for a photography book really quickly. You go into InDesign, you create 1-page layout, and then you can duplicate it throughout the book. We've got some images that are in there as full bleed to mix it up, and that works really well. We've gone for a silk stock here, so the yellow and the vibrancy really jumps off the page. Again, silk, safest choice if you're worried about colour reproduction. But the image is all in the same place, big chunky board around the edge, no page numbers. The reader's eye just gets drawn straight to the image. Slight issue here with the end papers not being supplied the right width, so we do have these white borders down the side, but we can discuss how you supply the end papers when you send the files over. We can make sure we get that absolutely spot on. Nice neat cover. You can have any bespoke size up to and including A5 for one set of prices, or you can have any bespoke size up to and including A4 for the next set. So if you want to go for something slightly off kilter, like 280 by 210 rather than standard A4, we can definitely do that. We don't charge extra for bespoke sizes. I'm not sure why we would. So it gives you full freedom to choose the size that you want rather than us dictating the price to you. final photography landscape book is the Strive book from Adam Slammer, which depicts the route that a number of willing participants hiked, cycled, climbed and swum across the Alps in 2019 to raise money. So the reason that I'm showing you this is the photography is the winner here. Absolutely stunning pictures, given loads of prominence on the page, nice border around the edge, plenty of room on the spine side of the page. You can see the allowance there, slightly thinner on the right hand side, on the spine side, more so that the images aren't squeezed into the middle. Some images are full bleed, but the photography in this book is the real winner. Maybe this is a good time for a little pep talk. You're an awesome photographer. You've got the belief in yourself. You know you've been away and you've taken some great shots from the last location you've been to. You've combined it together. You're wondering what to do with them. Let's put them into a book and get it printed. It doesn't really matter about the cover price if you've got the belief in your photography and you know that the content is something people are going to be interested in. Hardback books, anywhere between kind of 10, 50, even £100 we've seen hardback books for before. You can promote it on Kickstarter before it goes to print. Art books do particularly well on Kickstarter, so you add a video on there, you tell people about your project. We've seen people gross in excess of £25,000 and £30,000 doing art books on Kickstarter. They work really, really well, and it gives you the benefit that you get all the money first before you approach us for the print job, so you know exactly what your budget is. You can also print a few more copies, so if people want to buy the book after it's been released, so you've got some copies for your Kickstarter backers, and you've got more copies maybe for an art exhibition or a release, more prominent release on Instagram. But back yourself, your images are great. Let's get them into print and print them as a really, really nice photography hardback book. So let's start exploring hardback children's books. So we've touched upon this one before, A Melting Planet by Yasmin Kinsey. So this one's available in the hardback version and the softback version. We'll focus on the hardback version for this video guide, but printing both allows you to hit 2 price points for the sale price of the book, hit 2 markets, but hardback is more resilient. So we've got the front cover onto 170 silk. We do tend to print all of our printed hardback book covers on 170 silk. The advantage of that is then on this particular one, it's also got a gloss spot UV varnish. It's quite subtle, but if we tilt it towards the light, you can see that the snowflakes are reflecting with the varnish over the top. So it's silk with a matte lamination and then gloss spot UV varnish. If you pick up children's books from the shelf from WH Smith's Waterstones, you will see that they do tend to have some of the content, maybe an illustration or a logo or some text will be spot UV varnished. Just adds an extra premium level to the book. So the size of this one is 8 inches by 11 inches, so that's 203 by 273 millimeters. Nice landscape size, slightly shorter than A4, fits on a sheet quite well. Open it up, and for the inside pages, we've got an uncoated end paper. I like opening up a book and getting an uncoated end paper because it feels nice and tactile. And then a nice contrast, we have the text block itself onto 170 gloss. So for children's books, 170 gloss is going to be a really nice paperweight that you can go for the inside of your children's book. You can see it's reflecting off. The gloss gives the images a lot of vibrancy, makes the colours bounce off the page. They're not muted, they jump off. It engages with the children and helps them move through the book. So all of the content on this is neatly within the constraints of the outer border of the page. We can add a lot of premium features to a children's book. We can go for the hardback book binding, but I guess the content is going to be what really sells it. It really draws the parents in and it's going to engage with the children. So this is quite an on-topic publication at the moment, The Melting Planet. We have a quote from Greta Thunberg in the start, and it follows Pip the polar bear and her family in their Arctic environment as it gradually gets eroded away. But I won't ruin it, there is a happy ending. So we've got some pages which the content is neatly fitted within the page, and then others which are full bleed. So you do need to prepare the artwork slightly differently for this. We need an extra 3mm on all of the edges around the page on your InDesign file, and then when you export to PDF, for a large chunky hardback book, that process itself does take a little bit of time. So kind of work with us for a week or two. That process does take a little bit of time, and it might take a week or two of us going backwards and forwards with you just to make sure that the artwork is refined and perfectly set up for print. You're going to be spending a lot of money on the hardback book, so let's make sure it turns up exactly how you expected it to. We pride ourselves at XYZ in helping people out as much as possible. I think our record was 84 emails before a job went ahead. But we will pre-flight your artwork when it comes over. If anything doesn't look quite right, we always do let you know. Then we can go back and you can make changes to the artwork. You can make amends to the file, send it over and we'll give it another check. But we just want to make sure that we help you as much as possible in setting up your artwork to ensure that it arrives completely as you expected it to. Do allow an extra week or two for that process though, and hardback books themselves, 7 working days is kind of the bare minimum. If you go for a longer print run and you add some of the premium features, you are best to allow kind of 2 weeks, so a month for the whole process is realistic. We can't rush these. If we do rush them, that's when things do start to go wrong. But we can print you a really, really nice hardback children's book. Here we go then with 3 further options for children's books. We've got 210 by 210 square, we've got A4 landscape, and we've got A5 portrait. Each lends itself well to this subject matter. Obviously this is a little bit neater, it's easier for people to pick up and read. The 210 is a good compromise size, allowing you to show portrait and landscape artwork. And landscape, A4 landscape, we can go up to that size, allows you to show a wider type of artwork. So let's start with Radio Jones, which is the A4 landscape one. It's a neat, compact, hardback children's book. I think the takeaway from all children's books is it's the illustration and the content that really makes and really sells them. Cracking illustrations here, full colour print, gone for 170 silk on the inside pages. Again, 170 would be seen as an upgrade, 130 is the standard. With children's books, we do tend to gravitate towards silk or gloss, just because it gives the images a little bit more punch, makes them jump off the page and engages them more with the children. Obviously that depends on the specific age of the audience, but really nice illustrations here. We've got the borders around the edge again, talking about the borders, but if you keep things nicely neat inside, and if there is a little bit of movement, it's less apparent. A4 landscape, so you can have a series of images across the page. Let's move on to the journey of Teddy and Marla. So 210 by 210 is a really neat, convenient size. It means we can get 2 pages up on a sheet, which is cost effective for you. Digitally printed, got the name down the spine, and this one's black and white, or black print all the way through. Makes the illustrations quite striking. Loads of white space, really nice illustrations as we go through this one. This one's on uncoated. And again, a thick uncoated, so it's 170 gram. If you are going to pay the extra premium to go for a hardback book rather than a softback, you could also consider just making that upgrade. The actual difference between the paper thicknesses isn't a lot. It's the process of case binding which is going to jump your price up in comparison to softback. Again, nice, neat children's book. The final one. Now this one I wanted to showcase because this one is section sewn. So this was a much longer print run, so we litho printed this one, which brings section sewing into the equation at a lot cheaper price point than it does on digital jobs. So you can see the individual sections of 16 pages are gathered. This is 196 pages altogether, so they're gathered together and then bound along the left-hand edge with the end papers wrapped on. So the advantage of section sewing means that the pages can be pressed flatter without so much of a risk of the spine. It's not so easy to do with PUR glue, but like we said before, PUR is a lot cheaper on smaller print runs than section sewing is. You can see here the sewing through the centre of the book. So it's 196 pages gathered into sections of 16. Quite a chunky book, this one, 196 pages, A5. You can choose any bespoke size up to and including A5 for the same price if you wanted to trim a little bit off the height or the width, just to make it look a little bit more unique. 196 pages isn't going to be something that you're going to be able to do quickly. Do allow plenty of time for setting up the artwork. There was a little bit of backwards and forwards for maybe a week or two on this one, just to make sure that all the pages were set up perfectly. Everything was well within the edges. There was bleed on there. The last thing that you want to do is pay a lot of money for a hardback book. You've spent months preparing it and then it turns up and there's something not quite right. So what we pride ourselves on doing is spending a lot of time with you before the artwork goes ahead to print to ensure that what turns up is exactly what you expect. Let's also look at high-end premium art books. So we've got 3 examples here. Let's start with Frank Bolin's art exhibition book for the Hampstead School of Art. Hardback, gloss cover, we've got printed end papers, and then the book obviously showcases Frank's 2016 exhibition. So how do we get across the artwork and some text? So we've got here portrait artwork, so that lends itself perfectly well to full bleed, and then we've got neat text on the right hand side, kept well clear of the spine. The text itself isn't too big, that's probably 10 or 12 point, with the header slightly larger. Loads and loads of white space on there. You don't need to cram large text onto a page. It's a lot classier if you go for a more simple and a more refined layout. The caption itself in the bottom corner relating to the image is smaller again. The body of the text is obviously the prominent thing that people need to read, and then the heading is slightly larger and in a different colour as well. That's a good mechanism of doing it. So as we go through, some of the images are double page spreads. Some of them are featured on a page of their own. There are varying layout styles on this book. There's not a huge amount of consistency in the layout. The reader's eye jumps around as we're flicking through. We did print flat sheet proofs of this one because the images are very, very pale, and against fine art work produced maybe with a paintbrush or with intricate detail, it's going to be hard to replicate that printing in CMYK on paper. The original artwork itself probably has a texture from the canvas behind, which we're not going to be able to achieve in print. So let's do flat sheet proofs first. It means you see exactly what you're going to get before the final books turn up, and you can make tweaks and amends in Photoshop beforehand if the colours need to be boosted or turned down a little bit. The advantage of printing an art book is it gives people something to take away from your exhibition, but they have turned up at the exhibition itself and they have seen the original artwork. So the photography art book is a memento, but don't expect it to be an exact replica, because they've come and seen that on the wall anyway. So they've got both sides. Our opinion as a printer is an art book is a far nicer souvenir from the exhibition than just sending them a PDF on email. It's something tactile. They can put it on the table. It's a coffee table book. It's a memento of Frank's work or the art exhibition that they've been to. We'll bring William's book into this section as well, because it is a really, really high-end premium art book. We've gone for the yellow linen Brillianta, I think it was, on the front cover with red foil. So that's a huge contrast on there. It looks incredible. We open it up, we've got vermilion Colorplan end papers, another high-end premium feature. Decent photography, decent typography, and the images as you flick through are exceptional. They're well positioned and they jump off the page because of the paper choice. Vibrant colours. So let's pick out some key features from this book that make this really, really high-end and premium. So we've gone for the linen cover, we've gone for the red foiling over the top of it, which debosses slightly into it. We've got the title and the author's name on the spine, the Colorplan end papers, and we've got a really, really nice layout with bright, impactful photography inside, full colour that jumps off the page. So the combination of those 3 or 4 things really, really makes this high-end. You can then charge a higher cover price, promote it on your social media, people will come through and they'll love this book and they'll cherish it when it turns up. So Big Game Africa, as we've spoken about, is a slightly dubious subject matter that we're not 100% comfortable with, but let's look at what makes this a high-end premium book. So we have Colorplan cover. So straight away it has the beautiful red shade, it's got the texture on there. We've got gold foiling and printing on the outside of this book. We've got print down the spine. It's a beautiful chunky book. There's probably 200 odd pages in here. We open it up, we've got unprinted end papers, but in the actual inside pages, it's lovely warm shade, and then we've got full colour. Actually, we've got black and white and full colour images all the way through. How do we put text on there? So let's keep the text nice and neat. Like we said before, we don't need to overkill the text. The title is slightly bigger and then neater for the main body of the book. hugely different layouts as we go through this one. We've got text and we've got images, so it's a good way to mix it up. But the key things that make this a high-end premium art book are Colorplan cover, foiling, the printing on there, the sheer size of it, and the hardback cover.
We absolutely love the Pram in the Hall from Alice in Stone. It's a great example of a super premium coffee table art book. The finishes and the content combine to make it an exceptional example of a high-end art book. They say never judge a book by its cover, but let's judge this book by its cover. It's A4 and we have the hardback case wrapped with Wiccotex Brillianta. Really nice off salmon colour. It's got copper foiling on the cover and down the spine. We open the cover and we've got these high impact uncoated end papers with this great pattern spanning the double page spread. Following the end papers then we've got 148 inside pages onto 170 silk. So the silk allows the images to jump off the page and the colours stay nice and vibrant when they're printed. So the premise of this book is the much loved cult of the to-do list. In Alice's words, fretting about my lack of productivity, I exclaimed, that's where it's gone, into these notebooks, full of to-do lists, domestic trivia. They told the story of the Pram in the Hall. It's an exceptionally well-curated publication featuring lists from prominent women, including Bianca Jagger, Emma Freud, Amelia Fox and Shami Chakrabarti. It's a very enjoyable and hugely insightful book, which really depicts a lot of the innermost thoughts of the contributors. Alice has achieved great acclaim off the back of the Pram in the Hall and featured on many media outlets, the most high profile being a spot on Chris Evans' Radio 2 breakfast show. So to recap, the finishes that make this such an illustrious book are the linen style cover, the copper foiling. We love the patterned end papers, and of course the subject matter itself is engaging and does target a wide audience.
Another art book here for the Hampstead School of Art. So this is for the Stephen Snoddy exhibition. Again, we have printed end papers on this one. So there's a hint of the white edge of the paper. The advantage of printed papers over buying from Colorplan is that obviously you've got the full gamut, millions and millions of colour choices rather than being restricted to just the 50 odd colours that Colorplan supplies. So if there's a specific colour that you wanted to pull out of one of your pieces of artwork and add onto the end paper, this is a great choice to do it. So they've gone for probably 170 silk on there. It might be 170 uncoated, but when you add a layer of ink on over the top, it does give it a slight sheen. Again, 170 for the inside pages. Mixing the layouts up between showing the artwork on the left and the right hand pages, but really nice, colourful images. We print in CMYK, which is cyan, yellow, magenta and black. So you are going to have to allow for a little bit of leeway between your original kind of oil or acrylic paintings and what comes off our CMYK presses. But as we've spoken about before, people are going to turn up at the exhibition and they're going to be able to see the actual artwork as it is in reality. And then the book, the hardback book, the catalogue for the exhibition is a memento to take away to remind them of what the artwork looked like rather than an exact replication. So a little bit of leeway is required. Really neat book though. It's about 50 pages this one, so it's kind of a 5mm text block and then the extra overhang on the cover. Section at the back to showcase all of the artwork and give credits for where the exhibition and the pieces were shown. And there's Stephen. The final premium high-end art book we're going to look at is this beautiful book called Confluence. You can see here it comes wrapped, shrink wrapped for extra protection. So this is something that we can do for your high-end books.
want to ensure that they turn up perfect. Things do sometimes get knocked in transit, so we can shrink wrap for 20 or 30p a copy. That ensures that the actual book itself turns up pristine condition. So Confluence is an awesome book. It's a bespoke size, so it's 260 by 210. As we've said before, we can print all bespoke sizes. 10 by 8 is a particularly good one for photography, or 8 by 10 if you want to go for a landscape orientation. This one is 260 by 210 portrait, so slightly shorter than A4. Just makes the reader's eye work a little bit. It's not quite as predictable, I guess, as A4. Really, really nice size. So we've got 192 inside pages. This time we're printed onto 160 Evolution Uncoated, which is one of our house papers. It's 100% recycled, which does fit with the subject matter of this book. This is Arabic and Celtic storytelling, visual and written storytelling. Stunning, stunning book. So the inside page is on 160 gram Evolution Uncoated. So we're going to say that the standard text page weight is 115 GSM uncoated, 120 Evolution uncoated, or 130 silk. So there's standard paper weights. If you want a premium upgrade, which you might well do because it's going to be an expensive book anyway, you want to make it look as good as possible. So a premium upgrade would be jumping up to 170 house uncoated, 160 Evolution uncoated, or 170 silk. So they'd be the maximum paper weights we can bind in. So if you go for a really thin book like we spoke about earlier, if you've only got 28 or 32 inside pages, jumping the paper weight up to 170 gram is going to help you get up to the necessary spine width that would mean we can glue the book. So here we've got 160 Evolution, so it's really, really crisp as you flick through. It feels substantial. Almost each page is almost like a work of art. Stunning photography, illustrations. Confluence is another Kickstarter success story. So if you jump on Kickstarter, it works really, really well for art books. This was fully funded before it went to print. Takes a lot of the risk off the table as an author, as a self-publisher. You don't have to worry about getting a publishing company. You can go on Kickstarter yourself, and if there's enough interest in your project, it can be fully funded and backed, allowing you to pay for the print run up front without any financial cost or risk to yourself. Again, keep a few copies back or print a few extra copies for people who see the project once it's in print and then they want to buy one, but you can certainly get a lot of people and a lot of interest beforehand on Kickstarter. So we have 192 inside pages, so it's coming up almost 2 centimeters thick. As we open up the cover, we've got Colorplan ebony black end papers, the start and the end of the book. They really, really make a nice contrast with the cover material, which is again from Winter & Company, and it's their Napura canvas. So really, really kind of grainy, textured canvas, striking green colour, which is accentuated with the white foiling over the front. Again, because of the texture of the canvas itself, we really, really dig the foil in. So the white has come up quite opaque on this. It's worked really well. Slight deboss on there as well because it's pushed into the canvas. Got the logo, simple, chunky line weight on the logo, and then the text as well. Down the spine. So again, the key indicators that we're looking at on a book like this to work out why it is such a success and why it works as a high-end coffee table book is simple but strong cover graphics. We've got the foiling, we've got the material finish. It's a substantial book with 192 pages. We've got the upgrade to premium papers on the inside, and we've got Colorplan end papers. So adding kind of any or all of those is going to make for a great looking book. The timings on this, I think this was a print run of a few hundred copies. Timings, you really want to be allowing a good couple of weeks altogether. There are a lot of moving parts with the foiling and the binding, sourcing the cover material. So it can be a bit of a lead time from the continent on that. We'll see what happens after Brexit, and might be even longer.
But if you allow a good 2 weeks for the actual production at least, and then maybe a week or two backwards and forwards, just making sure that the artwork's prepared correctly before we go to print. There's always a few tweaks. Obviously there's a lot of idiosyncrasies and a lot of things to consider when you're preparing a hardback book, as you've seen from our guide already. So it's not going to be kind of a kind of click of the fingers that it turns up. If you allow a good month for your project, for preparing all the artwork backwards and forwards, maybe do a set of flat sheet proofs before we go ahead with the final print run and the actual production itself. It's a beautiful, beautiful art book, not something we want to rush. Let's allow the correct amount of time for it, but you can end up with a coffee table, high-end, premium art book that looks like this one. We can of course also print a hardback book to promote your business. So this is a recent yearbook we've printed. We could do it as an annual report for submission to Companies House, or we could do it as a straightforward promotional business brochure. So this is a nice neat 240 by 170 size. It's a longer print run, so it goes on our litho press, and 240 by 170 is a really nice convenient size that falls between A4 and A5 and fits really well on the printed sheet. We have 96 inside pages here. I'll just put this to the side. You can actually see that the 96 inside pages are collated into 3 sections. So 3 sections for the inside pages, and then they are bound together along the left-hand edge, and then the end papers attached on. What I will do on this job, it's a recent one, is I'll put up a video just now showing the final process where the text block with the end papers on then gets added to the front cover, pulled through the last processes of the binding, and then you get a finished book. So there's the 3 sections, 96 inside pages. So you open this one up and straight away you've got a bit of branding, which is neat. We've got printed end papers. We haven't seen this yet. This is a corporate brochure, so that lends itself really well. Just a really good design all the way through. Quite like the feature in the top right-hand corner of this one, which is the coloured tabs, so the reader can see instantly which section they're going to. And in the bottom corner, we have really, really neat, quite small and only 2 or 3 mil away from the edge, page numbers. So we've pretty much nailed the trimming on this one. They're consistent all the way through, but again, just helps the reader choose the page that they want to go to. So we can print this as a company brochure for you. Hardback book is really going to help you stand out from the business if you're a premium brand.
Yes, that's right. This guide is so informative, so helpful and so long that I even needed a haircut halfway through making it. We hope you enjoyed it. Well, that's a big one, wasn't it? Did you watch it in one go? Whew, good on you. We really tried to make this an unprecedented guide into what can be achieved when you come to print a hardback book. We've showcased the different sectors that it works in. So you've got illustrated children's book,
You've got 3 options for a company book, a promotional brochure, an annual report or a yearbook. You've got your photography book, and of course you've got your high-end premium art coffee table book. We pride ourselves in the level of help and guidance that we give you before your job goes to print. We understand it's a complicated process, so when you send the files over, there are a number of checks and pre-flights that we do. If something doesn't look quite right, we always come back to you and let you know first. Allow an extra week or 2 for this process because it can be quite time consuming, and we want to make sure that what turns up in your finished book is exactly what you're expecting. If you do have any further questions, and we really did try and cover every single thing in this video, then ping us an email on hello@xyz.co.uk, or maybe add a comment underneath the video here. We might be able to run a second guide which answers some more of your questions about hardback books. If you'd like a paper sample pack to be sent out, that's always a good way of choosing papers rather than guessing online and over email. Then again, there's a form on our website, or just ping us an email direct and we can get some papers sent out to you the same day. We really don't take it for granted that we're very fortunate to print for some extremely talented illustrators, photographers and creative businesses, and we do get genuinely as excited as you when the finished books come off the binding line. Ultimately, the hardback book is the best way possible of you getting your work out there. We're in the 2020s now. It's never been easier for you to get your work into print. You can self-publish at Ex Why Zed, you can go on Kickstarter and crowdfund it and get your project fully funded before you go ahead. Can you imagine how hard it would have been to make a hardback book 50 years ago, 20 years, even 10 years ago? I'll say it again, you can self-publish at Ex Why Zed really, really easily. We'll do everything we can to make the process as straightforward as possible, and we look forward to seeing your artwork. Now, thank you very much for watching this guide.